What's up, nerds and nerdettes and wee little nerdlings all? It's your buddy Big Johnny G for Two Gun Pixie presents Legendary Gaming.
Shut up and sit down.
My number 5 favorite Dungeons and Dragons module to run. B4, The Lost City. This is by Tom Moldvay from 1982, published by TSR. I find this module to be a great introductory module, a great first level module for characters and players, especially newbies, to be able to step right into the game. And it was developed, more or less, for that reason. Now, this game pulls together characters in a non-traditional way, not in a tavern, while they are accompanying, usually for security purposes, a caravan, a merchant caravan going through the desert. Now, the potential use of pre-adventure stuff going on in this module because of the desert, I think is really spot on. At higher levels, characters don't always fear the elements very much because of spells or magical items, enchanted armors, and such. It doesn't become that big of a deal to them, but at first level, beginning of the game, your environment, the conditions, the weather conditions, can be drastic, and this game definitely showcases that to begin with. So it does give some good pre-adventure options as well to help build up the whole feeling of tension and a little bit of anxiety as the party, as the merchant caravan gets lost in the desert, and then supplies are running low, water runs out, you don't have enough food, there's a sandstorm. How the heck are you going to survive? So for first level characters, doing this shows how the environment itself can be an adversary. Now, once the characters get into the module, into the ziggurat, and are working their way down, I really find that this module has very engaging NPCs. And depending on how the characters approach them and the situation of the civilization they find inside the ziggurat, these NPCs will either be helpful or hindering, sometimes downright harmful. And again, that's mostly up to the players and their role-playing of the aspect. R-O-L-E. Not rolling the dice for combat, necessarily. And I've always enjoyed working the NPCs in this module. Their insanities are really fun. This module brings together a lot of good balancing elements, I think, between the combat elements in the game, the interaction with the NPCs, and the exploration. I don't want to give anything away, but there are a couple of fun, unique aspects to this ziggurat for the characters to explore, and it does a very good job of balancing all three of these. And I think actually showcasing the fact that old school modules are a lot more than just hack and slash. Now, the end of this adventure, again, I don't want to give too much away, but it is a most epic final boss fight with a legit Cthulhian god, being, entity, elder being, elder god, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, that is the final boss of this. And for characters that have more than likely advanced to third level by the time they get to the final boss fight, it is a testimony to their survival. And again, without giving anything away, the last time I ran this module, the characters really won. Though it was a combat situation, they really did win through intelligence. They fought tricky, and it paid off. So for a first module, an introductory module, a first to third level module, to have such an epic level, crazy Cthulhian style deity to fight, I really think is a pinnacle for beginning modules. Now, ultimately, this module does have a great potential for the DM to fill things in. There's an entire city if the DM wants to create a much larger campaign world out of this simple Ziggurat adventure. And the NPCs I mentioned earlier too, there's organizations, and the players can actually join these NPC run organizations and bring a little bit more character to their character. Definitely check out B4, The Lost City. My number 4 favorite Dungeons & Dragons module to run, X2, Castle Amber. This is also by Tom Moldvay, came out a year earlier in 1981, and is published by TSR, just like the last module we discussed. Now, this module, X2, Castle Amber, also known as Chateau d'Amberville, is a great opportunity, I find, for players to explore other dimensions. In fact, the game even starts off with you lost in some mist while you were bedding down, camping for the night. And the mist is poisonous, and the one lone path through it leads to Chateau d'Amberville. And here, you are now in another dimension. So for a second module, a module for third level characters, you find yourself crossing over to another dimension, another plane of existence, so to speak. I think it's really big for such low level characters. The mansion, which is the first part of this module, is lost, as you could say, in dimensional seas. And the family in it is heavily based on Clark Ashton Smith writings and some of his more Lovecraftian kind of, I'd say weird tale kind of stuff. And this family is completely based on his writing, on his work, and their insanity shines through in this module, making them, much like I said for the last module, making them some of the most interesting NPCs that I, as a DM, have ever had the great opportunity to run. When you're dealing with madness in NPCs, there's so many options, especially in a fantasy setting, and it helps bring the characters a little bit more to life, making them, even if you are stereotyping them in a 2D fashion, it makes them more three-dimensional, because your players can envision them in their mind's eye that much better, that much easier. So I absolutely love the Amber family as portrayed in this module. Good going, Tom Mulvey. Now, besides the weird encounters with the Amber family and some of their servants and pets, this does offer some very interesting old-school, classic, love 'em or hate 'em style traps for your Dungeons & Dragons game. But it also involves ancient curses, which is something that it doesn't run through enough D&D modules. It sounds like an old trope that's been used too much, but really it hasn't. And to have it, again, so early in characters' careers, basically what would be the second module if you'd started from scratch, is a really good opportunity for such beginning characters. Even third, fourth level characters are still kind of newbies. And the old school traps, the curses, it really harkens back to some of the really good, great, fun RPG days of the 80s. Now, besides Castle Amber, you eventually then get into other dimensions. Yes, again, you are still having the opportunity to move through other worlds, huge worlds, actually, that you're going to be able to explore in parallel universes, I guess you could call them, as your characters venture through, trying to find a way out of Castle Amber, and then eventually to break the curse as they learn about it. But these world settings are huge. I mean, they're literally worlds. It's not like you're going into an area. No, this is like Narnia. This is like going through a closet to the wardrobe to Narnia when you pass through into these other worlds. And their settings are huge and spanning. In fact, the cover art of the module depicts a castle under attack in one of these other alternate parallel worlds. and if the DM wants to, we can really, really expand on these worlds, make them places characters can keep coming back to. It really just depends on the amount of work your DM has the time and the energy to put into it. But you really can expand this out unlimitedly. Unlimitedly. You can use this as a kicking off point, a jumping off point for your own campaign world even. Beautiful. Again, especially to find in such a low-level module. And, again, for a low-level module, this is going to give you an opportunity to fight dragons, encounter good dragons, fight evil dragons. And, your characters are barely 4th and 5th level by this time when you encounter them. One of them is pretty much at the beginning of the module. You're probably still going to be 3rd level, going through dungeons and encountering dragons. You literally cannot get more on point with a D&D module than that. In the final guardians in this module, dragons, creatures directly connected to elemental planes of existence that you have to maneuver through and get through, all to break this damn curse. And if you're lucky, maybe you get yourself a wish after this. It is. Go check out X2 Castle Amber. My number 3 favorite Dungeons and Dragons module to run. A1 through A4, The Slave Lords. This is by David Cook, Harold Johnson and Tom Moldvay, Alan Hammock, and Lawrence Schick. And these 4 modules were published between 1980 and 1981 by TSR. And this was an official tournament run of modules. Gen Con tournament modules back in the 80s. All right, these modules just are really the perfect opportunity to involve PCs and NPCs as emotionally driven characters. So, making the characters that the players are running more than just pieces of paper, giving them backgrounds, families, friends, backstories. Now you have the opportunity in this module to finally address that if you haven't had a lot of time before, especially if you're running these modules in the order I'm giving them in. You really haven't had a lot of time to address personal issues, family members, friends in the adventure. But now that you're entering this module, you have that opportunity because you are facing the slave lords, and that's what they do. They enslave, they kill, they murder, they pillage, and it's happened to your characters. Someone in their personal history, their background, has been affected directly by this. They are pushing up daisies, or they're in shackles somewhere. And this really drives the point home for the characters that this, unlike anything else they've done so far, this is personal. And it's delivered in a serialized format between 4 modules that tie together absolutely seamlessly. Now, beginning with a combat-heavy exploration of a fallen temple, the party is going to find its first clues here while battling orcs. They're going to find their first clues to a bigger picture behind the coastal raids that have been happening. And this is going to lead into a much, much bigger story. It's going to lead the characters into going into the slave lord-run city in the heart of an orcish empire itself. And the characters are going to have a chance to explore that city and use a lot of stealth, a lot of information gathering skills. This is the sneakiest module. If you're running the series as I'm giving it here, this is the sneakiest module. The most stealth-needed module that your characters are going to have a run through. It's also going to give the DM the first real chance to run a city-based adventure. And having run city-based adventures, especially recently, actually just coming up on our upcoming episodes of Tales of the Table that drop on the 3rd and 4th Thursday of every month, city adventures are much different to run than dungeon and tavern adventures. And then this is going to be your first taste of doing that. And it really does pull together the whole concept of a city-based adventure perfectly. This is, I think, one of the models that every city-based adventure has been, to some degree, based on. So from the city, it's going to lead to them following further clues, gathering more information, and finally leading down to the heart of where the Slave Lord's base is. The characters are actually, by the end of this module, if you're running it in tournament mode, and I suggest no other way to run these 4 modules, please. If you're running this in tournament mode to get the full effect feel of this, there's gonna be a Dungeon Master's Fate. Is that even else at FIAT? Dungeon Master's Fate going on here, because at the end of this module, spoilers, if you're a player and not a DM, don't listen to this. Give me a moment. Yes, because this is going to force the players to be caught at the end of the module. Because the next module starts with them in prison. That's right, it ends off with them needing to escape the Slave Lord's prison. Your characters are gearless, itemless, equipmentless, weaponless. No spell books, no prayer items, no swords for the fighters, or arrows for the elves. And you're going to have to escape from the Slave Lord's dungeon and then make it up to town again in the middle of a volcano erupting. Talk about background environment effects. And while dodging the evil citizens of this city, while fighting the agents of the Slave Lord, while trying not to be destroyed and killed by a ball of lava falling from the sky at you, you're eventually going to make your way for the epic finale of this to the docks themselves and have battles on the docks and on the ships as the Slave Lords try to escape, and you have to put a stop to it. This has been one of the greatest finales I've ever run, and I've done this series several times over the last 40 plus years that I've been DMing. It's one of the best, most explosive endings to a module series I've ever run. Love it, absolutely love it. Go get more information on A1 through A4, the Slave Lord series. My number 2 favorite Dungeons & Dragons module to run. G1 through G3, Against the Giants. This is by the man himself, Gary Gygax, and was published in 1978 by his TSR company, the original publishers of the game. Now, this can be connected to the Slave Lord modules. Later rewritings have put them together, and I have always run them together. So following the strings that you have found that were pulling the Slave Lords, no, they were not in charge, as it turns out. And following those puppet strings, it leads the characters into some of the toughest battles that they have ever had up until this point. Because this is a massive combat chance for the DM and the players to run in this module. Yes, you're going to need stealth at times. Oh, hell yeah. But when it gets right down to brass tacks, this is a combat-heavy module. And not only is it combat-heavy, what makes it dangerous is it's all giants. Giants are a lot more devastating opponents, I think, than most players give them credit for. And this showcases exactly how deadly giants can be. And it does it in increments, starting with the steeding of the Hill Giant Fort. But it gives you a taste, because every giant is here at the Hill Fort for a celebration. And they'll give you a taste of how tough the later fights are going to be as you get through the Hill Giants to the Frost Giants, and then finally the Fire Giants. Now, the environment in this game, really, yes, the volcano exploded in the Slave Lord series, but it really hasn't been brought up since the characters have started way back in Before the Lost City because of the desert and the heat. But this this is going to bring back environmental problems. Not so much with the hill giants, but once the characters advance and start facing off against the frost giants, they're going to be dealing with environment problems because of the absolute sub-freezing temperatures and howling winds that they're going to have to deal with in this. And then the opposite, as you can imagine, when they face against the fire giants in their magma-filled caverns. The heat is enough to kill most human beings to begin with. So it is fun to see the elements being brought back in so heavily into a module situation, especially if you've been running these in this particular order. These 3 modules in the Giant series harken back to some of the greatest, most powerful combat roll, right, ROLL, heavy RPG games of all times. This is by far one of the toughest series of fights your characters are ever going to encounter. And by the end of this series, you're going to find out that no, the stupid hill giants, the fairly intelligent frost and fire giants have not been the true masterminds in this. Even they have had their puppet strings pulled, and by the end of G3, you finally get some answers as you discover the Drow were behind everything.
My number 1 favorite Dungeons and Dragons module to run.
D1 through D3, the Drow series. This is by Gary Gygax, published in 1978 by his TSR company. This module is a great introduction to both the Underdark, adventuring through the Underdark, experiencing the Underdark, as well as underwater quests, subaquatic themes, which are very rarely touched upon in Dungeons and Dragons. And this starts off really heavy with the Kawato and their underwater shrines. Now, after dealing with these fishmen and their evil religious concepts and beliefs, you're going to finally make your way to the Drow. Now, keep in mind that at the time of this module's writing, the Drow were new. They had no history in the game system. In fact, when I run this in Greyhawk, I often run this that the Drow are nothing but a legend, a boogeyman to the elven people. And the shock, and every time I've run it like that, I have to admit my elf players do it justice when they see that Drow slave lord at the end of A4. Imagine seeing a real boogeyman that you spent hundreds of years thinking was nothing but a story. So if you play it like that, this makes the module that much more interesting and powerful, actually. And you're going to get to a chance to explore the whole landscape of this section of the Underdark. The first time ever the Underdark had been put in print in Dungeons and Dragons. And you're going to be traveling through the passages and the open cavern systems, which are like huge swaths of land. You're going to be surveying this, and you're going to be surviving the horrors of being trapped pretty much in the middle of the most evil civilization your characters have ever encountered. By far, even more evil than the Orcish Empire that the slave lords were operating out of. It gives the characters a chance to really understand and see firsthand the vile societal structures that the Drow have, the matriarchal society of the Lolith worship. It should anger the characters a bit. It should shock the characters a little bit, and it should also scare them just a little bit. It should be a hodgepodge mix of emotions if it's DM'd and played out correctly. And at the end of this module, the characters are going to get a chance to face off against the physical avatar on the prime material plane here of Lolith herself, deep within her most unholy of tempo while battling through the drow hordes. Not since your battle in the Lost City against the Cthulian demonic god being have you encountered such a hopeless situation. But yet, if your characters do survive through this, they will get the opportunity to go into her own realm and face the actual goddess in her own plane of existence. And that in D&D is the only place that you can actually, unless they've taken special magical arcane precautions, is the only place you can actually kill a deity in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. That leads me to my honorary mention here in Big Johnny G's 5 favorite, and that is Q1, Queen of the Demon Web Pits. This is by Gary Gygax and David C. Sutherland III, published in 1980. You got it, by TSR. The true culmination of this extended campaign that started story-wise at 4th level with the Slave Lords and has taken the characters right to the abyss, right to hell itself, to the Demon Web Pits that are ruled by the demon goddess Lolth herself. The characters are going to begin in one of the most interesting and exhausting for the players, exhausting mazes that they can ever encounter. And that is the web itself. The web itself is a huge maze to be encountered and to get lost in. In areas of the web that are above or below other areas of the web, characters can try to bypass going through the web and just going down or up to the other level that crisscrosses this. But you can get lost. And you get lost forever in the interdimensional space between the webs. As you can imagine, that's going to make mapping almost impossible for the players. And that's one of the purposes. Now, while you're traveling through the maze, the players are going to encounter some tough but common combat procedures. But as they go further in through the web and different levels of it, they're going to find that not all these doors are leading to combat-based rooms. No. Much like you experienced in Chateau d'Ambaville, some of these doors lead to whole other realms, worlds, parallel universes in the multiverse of Dungeons and Dragons. You know, maybe you can even connect this somehow to the alternate worlds that you travel through in Castle Amber itself. That's always a possibility. And this is going to give the DM a chance to, again, world build a little bit on the information that's given to him or her on these worlds. These worlds that the characters are going to get a chance to pass through to gain more information on what's going on, where Lolth is, how to stop her, and in the meantime, just try to put a stop to some of her generals and lieutenants, even if they're in other realms of reality. Now, this is going to culminate in some craziness. It's going to culminate in a gigantic steampunk style spider ship. Oh, yes! Her flagship. Her spider ship. The spider ship of Lolth itself will be the point of the final encounter's final battle with the goddess in her own reality. So she can die here. But it is not going to be easy. I mean, characters are literally going to be shaking the pillars and the foundations of the D&D cosmos by battling and killing her. You really need to run this whole series. And if you need the first 2 modules to get the players there to A1 and A4, yeah, you're going to want to check out Lost City and Castle Amber. And as a final quick little note, if you have characters that survive all of these adventures, well, then you can just throw them and the Gary Gygax classic of all classics, S1, The Tomb of Horrors, that was published in 1978 by TSR. If you want, put down in the comments and I'll do a whole video just on that one module. But those are my top 6 favorite Dungeons & Dragons modules to DM.